Oh, these dreadful mourning clothes are so itchy.
At least I'm not asking you to wear my hair.
Imagine a world where death is not a taboo subject, hidden away in hospitals and funeral homes, but instead it's openly displayed, discussed, and even celebrated. In this world, families pose with their dead loved ones for photographs, where mourning is an elaborate social performance and encouraged. And in this world, reminders of your mortality are woven into everyday life. Welcome to the Victorian Era, a time when death had a unique and often unsettling place in society. Today on the Spooky Friends Club, we dive deep into the Victorian obsession with death, exploring the macabre beauty of post-mortem photography, the intricate rules of mourning, and the cultural forces that shaped this strange yet captivating relationship with mortality. To understand the Victorian obsession with death, we first have to understand the world that they inhabited. Death was a constant presence, far more than it is in modern societies. The Victorian era, despite its advances in industry and technology, was plagued by high mortality rates. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis swept through cities, claiming countless lives. And at this time, infant mortality was shockingly high. Many children didn't live to see their 5th birthday. At this time, most people died at home, surrounded by family, not in a sterile hospital environment that we have today. Death was a familiar part of life, a natural cycle, and it couldn't be ignored. This constant exposure to death shaped the Victorian attitudes and customs that we see today. During this time, there was a real fear of premature burial, and there were cases where it did happen, but medical knowledge was really limited, and there were documented cases of some people, unfortunately, being buried alive. This led to some pretty bizarre inventions like the coffin bell, that an interred person could ring if they were awake, and it would alert people to dig them up. There was also a fear of body snatchers who would dig up the freshly buried corpses and sell the corpses to the medical schools. But perhaps the most striking manifestation of this Victorian obsession with death was the practice of post-mortem photography. The invention of the daguerreotype in 1839 made photography accessible for the middle class for the first time. Suddenly, ordinary families could afford to have their portraits taken. But for many Victorians, the most important portrait they ever had was their last one. But that's what postmortem photography is, also known as memento mori photography. It became a widespread practice, and they're not gruesome photos of a mangled up body. These weren't gruesome snapshots. They would carefully stage the portrait of the deceased and make them look as if they were just peacefully sleeping. For many families, the photo of a lost infant or a young child, a post-mortem photograph might be the only photograph that they will ever have of this loved one. It's a way to preserve their memory, to hold on to their image in a time when their death probably just really felt so final. The style of these photographs often varied. Some showed the deceased just lying in a coffin peacefully, surrounded by flowers, while others posed them in chairs or even possibly standing, supported with hidden stands, to make them feel more alive. Sometimes the photographer would even paint pupils on the eyes to make it seem like they were still alive, the illusion of life. To our modern eyes, this could seem completely unsettling, even macabre. But for Victorians, this was an important way for them to confront death, to make it less frightening and to help remember those that they had lost. They didn't have social media posts to look back on when someone had passed away. They were a visual reminder of the memento mori. In Latin, it states, "Remember, you must die." The idea of capturing these photos wasn't just about death, it was about performing your grief, probably way healthier than what we do today. We almost pretend that death doesn't happen until it happens, and then we're shocked. But mourning was a ritualized and very public affair, governed by strict rules of etiquette. The way you dressed, the length of time in which you mourned, even your behavior while mourning, were all strictly dictated by social conventions. Mourning clothes were essential, black being the color of grief for the Victorian period, And even the type of black you wore, for how long you wore it, depended on your relationship to the deceased. For example, a widow would be expected to wear black for 2 years. Parents who had lost a young child, maybe only one. There were different kinds of grief: deep mourning, second mourning, and half mourning, each with their own specific fabrics and specific accessories. Deep mourning meant dull, lusterless black fabrics with no jewelry or adornments. Gradually, some ornamentation and less severe adornments were allowed, but of course, men had it easier, usually wearing black suits and black armbands as a sign of mourning. Even your distant relatives were expected to adhere to the social constructs of mourning during this time. Funeral customs were equally elaborate, and wakes were very common, often held in the home, where the body would be displayed. Curtains were drawn and mirrors were covered. This was to prevent the spirit from becoming trapped. Though I suspect it also had something to do with people focusing on the mourning and not on themselves by looking in the mirrors, which was custom in church going at the time, which also would be custom in the funeral practices. And clocks were stopped at the time of the person's death. The body was always carried out of the home feet first, so the spirit wouldn't beckon anyone else to follow. Memento Mori wasn't just about photographs. You see, Victorians also created jewelry from the hair of the deceased, and they wove it into intricate patterns, even setting it in lockets or brooches. These keepsakes were a way of keeping our loved ones close, even in death. So why this elaborate obsession with death? Several factors contributed to the Victorian cult of death. Religious beliefs often played a significant role, but Victorians placed a great importance on having a, quote, good death, believing that how you died determined the fate of your soul. Funerals and mourning were often seen as essential for ensuring a passage to a peaceful afterlife. Social status was also a factor. The way you mourned was a reflection of your respectability and your wealth. Elaborate funerals and expensive mourning clothes were a way to demonstrate your social standing. But perhaps this is all just a simple reflection of the need to find a way to cope with death. As it was so prevalent during the Victorian time, there were many fascinating ways to die.
You say he died how?
He was torn to pieces by many cats, sir.
Cats? What?
Rituals provided a framework for processing the loss, a way to express sorrow in a structured and socially acceptable way. You don't want to go wailing about your great aunt Jackie who passed away. You want to show respect. And in this time of high mortality, these rituals were a necessary part of life. The Victorian era does have a certain fascination with the macabre. The same era that produced beautiful art and literature also had a dark undercurrent, a fascination with the dark, grotesque, and unsettling. Post-mortem photography and elaborate mourning rituals were, in a way, a reflection of the darker side of the Victorian psyche. The Victorian way of dealing with death might seem strange to us today. We tend to shy away from death. We tend to keep it hidden, a private practice, if you will. But to the Victorians, death was an unavoidable part of life, and they confronted it head-on with those elaborate rituals, haunting photography, and a unique blend of grief and fascination. The Victorian death cult offers us a glimpse into a world where mortality was a constant companion, and where the lines between life and death were blurred. The spirituality movement. It's a reminder that our own relationship with death is shaped by our culture and our time, and that even the most unsettling customs can tell us something profound about the human experience. What do you think about the Victorian obsession with death? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. We love to hear from our Spooky Friends Club members. And if you're fascinated by the dark corners of history, ghost stories, and unsolved mysteries, then you found us. You found your club. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. And for more spooky content, more deep dives, and community discussions, visit spookyfriendsclub.com. We're always unearthing new macabre tales and unraveling historical enigmas. Until next time, hug your loved ones while you still have them. So spooky.